Okay, this is my structural analysis for Oregon DHS child welfare. I worked for CP. I worked in Portland. I was a caseworker. I worked in Child Protective Services and permanency for about a total of 3 years. Haven't worked there for several years since 2009. Wow, a long time. But that was really the longest run I had in an organization. And I feel like I'm pretty familiar with it. And I still am very interested in child welfare. So here is a timeline of child welfare. So you see here in the 1870s, there was a very famous case, the first recorded child abuse case in the United States. Was a 6-year-old girl named Mary Ellen. Her case led to the creation of the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, which was the world's first protection agency. Meanwhile, around the same time, there was Native American children were being taken from their homes and placed into boarding schools. There's a quote from Richard Pratt, who's one of the founders of the boarding schools. He said, he described his philosophy in a speech that he gave in 1892. He said, "A great general has the only good in a great general has said that the only good Indian is a dead one." Pratt said, "In a sense, I agree with the sentiment, but only in this, that all the Indian there is in the race should be dead. Kill the Indian, save the man." Okay, so going forward to 1962. Prior to 1962, the government wasn't involved in child welfare. It was all done through private agencies or religious agencies. In 1962, two big events happened that changed child welfare. One was battered child syndrome was published by Dr. Henry Kemp, and in this article, Dr. Kemp really defines child abuse as being more than just the physical abuse to a child, but also neglect. He talks about being able to diagnose child abuse, different forms of child abuse, such as battered child syndrome, mental, physical neglect. So the Security Act came as it was very influenced by the battered child syndrome, and it was the first act that really gave government authority to intervene in families' lives for the sake of child protection. In 1971, DHS in Oregon DHS in Oregon began their programs. In 1974, CAPTA, which is the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, gave funding to states that were in compliance with their regulations for social workers for child abuse. It defined child abuse. It required mandatory reporting, and since it was enacted in 1974, it's been amended several times. Then came another important act, the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was in response to nearly 1 in 3 Indian children being removed from their homes by public and private agencies going back to the 19th century. And the last act that I think is of note is the ASFA, the Adoption Safe Families Act. This act is important because it moved So it advocated for children not lingering in foster care. So the DHS mandate, the mission is to help Oregonians in their communities by achieve well-being and independence through opportunities that protect, empower, respect, choice, and preserve dignity. Some of the goals that are related to child welfare are children and youth. The goal is to have children and youth are safe, well, and connected to their families, communities, cultural identity. Safe, well, and connected to partners, clients, and stakeholders are actively engaged in a variety of collaborative and meaningful ways. Culturally specific and responsive services are provided by highly qualified and diverse staff, and the department is committed to equal access, service excellence, and equity for all Oregonians, the core values that provide the foundation for how we interact with our clients and coworkers: integrity, innovation, respect, service equity, responsibility, stewardship, and professionalism. So moving on to the definition and the focus of the problem. So the problem is child abuse. Child abuse is defined by the Captain Act in 1974 is any act or failure to act on the part of a parent or caretaker results in death, serious physical or emotional harm, serious sexual abuse, exploitation, or an act or failure to act which presents an imminent risk of serious harm. So different forms of child abuse are defined by DHS are physical abuse, mental injury, sexual abuse, neglect, and threat of harm. So you can see under threat of harm, they've broken that down further to be domestic violence in the home, neglect. There's a threat of neglect. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental injury. So So this is kind of how I remember the process being. So first, there's a report of child abuse. Then caseworkers are, if it's not screened out and it's deemed worthy of an investigation, a child abuse assessment starts. And what that entails is interviewing with a child and parents, going to the home to do a home visit, speaking to community members or teachers, people who have contact with the family, And then based on all of the information that is gathered during that assessment, the caseworker has to make a determination whether they think the allegation of abuse is founded, unfounded, or unable to determine. So if they deem the abuse allegation to be unfounded, then DHS is gone. We're out of their life. If it's unable to determine, it's either the case is closed and we're gone, or there may be some referral to services, and at the same time, and we leave the picture. If the case is founded, then most likely you need to have the court's involvement. I think that's a misconception from the public, is that DHS make all of these big decisions about home. And yes, they can, in emergency situations, do that without having prior court approval. But in those cases, they have to go to court within 24 hours to make sure to get that approval from the court. So the court has to review the case and determine whether or not they agree with the actions taken by the CPS worker. So once the court becomes involved, there are really two ways that the case can go from there. It's either there's an in-home plan, but with court oversight. So, well, I guess an in-home plan would be maybe the family just needs some services, and there's concern that without having those services, the child would be at risk for harm. So it's a way for the court to monitor that the parents are complying. They are getting the help they need. So another option would be, so if they decide the child is not safe in the home, then they would determine whether the child would be placed in foster care or with family members. The goal is always to return the child to the home. In order to do that, there's something needs to be addressed, whether it's substance abuse treatment or